Hello everyone, greetings from VNR JYOTHI Institute of Engineering and Technology. This is Manohar Reddy, Department of Cybersecurity, Data Science and AIDS. Today in this session I am going to discuss about the concept of data transmission in the layers, network layers. So there are 7 layers of network in the data communication models. So those are application layer, presentation layer, session layer, transport layer, network layer, data link layer and physical layer. But how all these layers are interconnected and all how these layers are data transmitted from one layer to another layer. So that is the main responsibility of the each and every layer to perform the data transmission. So layers in the network, typically we can call it as OSI model or ISO OSI reference model or network layer architecture or data communication model. So the layers in network can break down complex communication process into smaller, manageable and independent parts. So entire complex communication process is divided into smaller, manageable and independent parts. This architecture allows different software and hardware to work together universally by separating the physical transmission of the data from application logic. So how these all universally separating the physical transmission of the data from application level into physical level. So this entire transmission, data transmission will be covered in this session. So how each and every layer, physical layer is converting bits, data link layer is converting frames, network layer is converting packets, transport layer is converting segments. Each and every layer is having some separate responsibilities. But how these all layers are communicating to perform the data transmission in the real-time scenarios. So here let's take an example, two computers, A1 as the sender and A2 as the receiver. So they are connected through a network and see how all OSI layers are work together. So we can communicate two systems by communication mediums like guided media or unguided media. Guided media or unguided media. So through these two, guided media or unguided media. So guided media is nothing but what? Guided media is nothing but cables connected, connection oriented. Cables connected or connection oriented or wired. Unguided media is nothing but what? Connectionless oriented or wireless oriented. So now the scenario here we can understand how the data is communicated from A1 system to A2 system or A1 sender to receiver. So how they are communicating? Through guided or unguided, whatever it may be. So the scenario is what? A1 wants to send the message hello to the second system. Now sender side operates perform. The layers are follows the principle of from sending side to receiver side by following application layer, presentation layer, session layer, transport layer, network layer, data link layer and physical layer. And the same will be operated in the receiver side from down physical layer towards application layer. Physical layer towards application layer. In the sender side it performs application layer to physical layer and the receiver side it performs physical layer to application layer. So how this all works, we'll see. The application layer, this is where the application exactly works. So we can use the browsers, emails, WhatsApp, FTPs, all we can do some tasks, some accessing applications. So example, user types hello. User is typing hello and application layer prepares the data is what? Hello. And it is processed to the next layer called presentation layer. So now as you are in the application layer, you are sending a message hello to the next layer. So once the message is ready, once the data is ready, the application layer transmit it to the presentation layer. So presentation layer is on roll. Now presentation layer is responsible for what? To do the encryption process or compression process or data format conversion process. So it is received the original message hello from the application layer and it is encrypted. It is doing the responsibility of encrypting that message or compressing that message or converting the format of the data of that message. So here hello is the example. Hello is the example of the data which is received from the application layer to the presentation layer. Now presentation layer is doing any of this responsibility. So now it is encrypted, maybe encrypted as KHOOR. This is the encrypted data. The original data is what? Hello and KHOOR is what? Encrypted data. Now, after encrypting this data, it forwards, passes to data session layer. Passes to data session layer. Now, session layer is taking this processed data and creates and manages communication sessions. So in between client and server, it manages the establishment of the connections. Because the data wants to send to the next receiver. Receiver side. So now the session layer takes the responsibility of creating the sessions, manages the communication session. Now example, A1 requests connection with A2 session. So A1 wants to send this message. Through this application layer, presentation layer, session layer. The data has been arrived. The data is in the session layer. Now session layer is taking the responsibility that creates a connection between A1 and A2 because A1 is requested. Now the session is established. Connection is established. Data is ready in the same session layer, and connection is also established. Then passes data to the transport layer. Now what transport layer will do? So in the transport layer, TCP and UDP protocols are present, and their responsibility is what? To do the segmentation process, reliability process, assigning port numbers to the data. So example, this hello, and that becomes a segment, that converted into the segments with port numbers, source port equal to 5000 or destination port equal to 80 or something. So now this transport layer added that encrypted data with the help of this TCP header. So here hello message is already encrypted, and that encrypted data is with TCP header. So TCP header is added to the data. So now this is called as what? Encapsulated data. Because the data which is coming from the application layer, presentation layer, through session layer to this transport layer is added with the TCP header. Now this entire data is called as encapsulated data. And now the network layer. Network layer is responsible for what? Logical addressing and routing. Here the internet protocol will establish it. So he knows that source IP, the where data is coming from and where the destination it wants to reach. So now the IP header also added to this entire encapsulated data. So IP header is added to this TCP header and hello encapsulated data. This unit is called. Now after adding this IP header to the encapsulated data, that will be called as packet. So now we can call it as a packet. So network layer is responsible for creating packets. So wherever the data is coming from application layer, presentation layer, session layer to the TCP layer, the TCP layer is making it has a encapsulated data, and network layer is converted into the packets. Now it passes packets to the data link layer. So now data link layer is doing what? Data link layer is framing the data and MAC addressing the data and error detection and connecting the data. So now it adds source MAC address, destination MAC address and CRC to the data. So source MAC address is what? Like this, and destination MAC address is what? Like this. Now this frame will be added to this entire data. So DLL header, IP packet and trailer. So DLR header is starting of the header and trailer is one, and IP packet is received from this network layer. So this entire will become frame. This entire data will become as frame. Now this frame passes frame to the physical layer. This entire frame will be passes to the physical layer. So data link layer is responsible for creating the frame. We already discussed in the previous session. The entire message is converted into the frames. Each and every frame will be called as a bits in the physical layer. So now physical layer is the responsibility of transmission of bits. So frame is received by the physical layer, and that entire frame will be converted into the frame. converted into the bits. So frame converted into bits and sent through cables. So this is the A1 data is now at a physical layer, and this entire data is converted into the bits. Entire frame is converted into the bits. This entire bits are moving towards the A2. This is the receiver side. So now after receiving this data to the receiver side A2, how it is extracted the original data. So here only bits travels through this medium. So now bits are transmitted through this medium to the A2 receiver side. So at receiver side, the reverse process happens. First physical layer takes the all bits, the next data link layer, the next network layer, transport layer, session layer, presentation layer, application layer. So how each and every process will happen. So now physical layer receives this entire bits, so convert bits into frame, and that frame will be processed to the data link layer, or that bits process into the data link layer. Now data link layer checks that CRC, destination MAC and all the things, and removes DLL header, DLL trailer, and extracts it into the IP packet. So extracted into that IP packet. So whatever the packet has been packed in the network layer from the sender side, that will be extracted as a packet. So now it will be IP packet. So after extracting the data into the data link layer, that will be converted as packet. Now that packet has been processed to the network layer. The packet is processed to the network layer. Now network layer checks that the destination IP. If IP matches A2, then removes IP header. It removes IP header and extract the TCP segment. Extracting the TCP segment. That entire TCP segment will be processed to the transport layer. That extracting entire TCP segment to the transport layer. Now transport layer checks the port number. Reassemble the segments if needed, and removes TCP header. And extract the data. That extracting data will be hello in an encrypted format that passes to the session layer. Now session layer maintains the communication session, passes data towards the presentation layer. So once it is received, this is the encrypted data. Once it is received to the session layer maintains the communication session, and once it is forwarded to the presentation layer, the session layer will close the connection, because the session layer is responsible as what? Communication establishment and communication termination. So now the data is forwarded into the presentation layer, the session layer is going to be terminated. Now presentation layer is decrypting the data, decompresses data. So whatever the data is coming from the session layer, transport layer, that entire data is encrypted format, right? Because we already encrypted the data from the sender side only. So now the received by the receiver side in the presentation layer, that data will be decrypted. That decrypts and decompress the data into this original format, and it passes to the application layer. So after receiving that application layer, we are seeing on the screen as the original message hello, which is sent from the application layer from the sender side. So to the user on A2 now is showing all this data hello. So these are all the way we can see the data transmission, how the data is transmitted from one system to another system through this operating all the layers. So once again we'll see entire complete flow diagram here. So A1 as a sender and A2 as the receiver. So A1 sends the data application through application layer, sends the data hello, and this hello message is forwarded to the presentation layer, and in this presentation layer it encrypts the data and forwarded to the session layer, and session layer creates a connection to forward it to the next layer, transport layer, and now transport layer is added TCP header to the data, so that this data is nothing but encapsulated data, and for this encapsulated data is ready and forwarded to the network layer, and this network layer is adding IP header to this entire data. So now this will be the packet. Once IP header is added to the TCP data, that is encapsulated data, it will be the packet. Now packet will be forwarded to the data link layer, and this data link layer will be added MAC header to convert into the frame entire data, and these frames are transported into physical layer, and this physical layer is responsible for converting all that frame into bits. Now this is the output from the sender side. Now this output is input for the receiver side. Now how the receiver will be extracting all the data. So once the data is arrived to the receiver side, through this physical layer, the entire bits are converted into the frame in the data link layer, and that frames are converted as a packets in the network layer, and through network layer it checks the port numbers, destination addresses, IP addresses and everything. It forwarded to the session layer, and through the session layer connection is established and connection is disconnected, and through that it forwarded to the presentation layer, and presentation layer will decrypt the data and decompress the data, and original data is received by the application layer. That original data is what? Hello. So this is the way the two machines are communicating, two devices are communicating with the help of all the operating system layers. So the flow is what? Data to the segment to the packets, packet to the frames to the bits. This is the sender side. And once it is received by the receiver side, receiver receives bits, and that bits are converted as a frames to the packets to the segment to the data. So once the data is received by the receiver on the application layer, he can able to see. This process is called as what? Encapsulation at A1 and the decapsulation at A2. So this is the way how all the layers are communicated, with the help of protocols to transmit the data, to share the data from one system to another system. So because of this, all the principles, protocols, layer functionalities, we are sharing or exchanging the data between two or more systems. Thank you all for understanding of this concept.